What the Tech is sponsored by Hover.com. Domain names made simple. Go to gfq.hover.com and get 10% off your entire purchase. And by Stitcher Radio. Listen on the go via the Stitcher mobile app. For more information, go to stitcher.com/GFQ. Welcome, everybody, to another international edition of What the Tech. I'm Major Zarian, and broadcasting live from France is Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
I am well. How are you?
Still in France.
I am still in France.
You go for a month, right?
3 weeks.
3 weeks. Okay, so this is your third week there.
Right. We're flying home on Friday.
You're flying home on Friday. Last week we did not have a show because Paul was traveling France.
I was.
I would hope he's going to go and do things other than sit here and do podcasts from France
Sure.
every day. I know you didn't do Windows Weekly either. And people were panicking. What happened? Is the show on hiatus? No, we took a week off. Paul needed to go do things, and I enjoyed the day off. I pretty much do what I do when I'm doing a show, and that's drink. So nothing changed in my life last week.
Right.
So a lot's been going on. You know, last week we didn't have a show. This week... I did the show notes a little early, and about an hour or two ago, breaking news. So I want to start off with this breaking news and get this out of the way.
I don't understand how this is breaking. Who first of all, who wrote this?
Well, everybody.
Okay. Who was the original? Someone originated it.
I don't know who originated, but I saw.
Where did this steaming pile of lie come from?
Well, I saw it on Engadget. And I'm going to go based on the Engadget article. I don't know who originated the story, but it did come from Engadget, from what I know. It was, I think, like 11 o'clock in the morning, so a couple hours ago. And the headline was Microsoft Surface Windows RT tablet coming in October, which we know, for $199. And when I saw this, it didn't really register, and I was like, oh, okay, cute. They're going to be $199 competing with Android. And I realized, I'm like, wait a minute, this is a 10-inch tablet.
No, this is a computer. Yeah.
This is we're not talking about, a 7-inch tablet. We're talking about an iPad competitor.
By the way, if this thing's $199, I buy one of these for everyone in my family. That's a stupid price, but there's no way it's $199. No way. Okay, so I'm gonna read the story here. I'm gonna read a little bit. Yeah.
There were some key points that I saw that I was like, huh. The MSRP might currently be lower than Microsoft's own costs. It would line up with the Nexus 7 and Kindle Fire. Look, I mean,
it's not.
It's neither one.
No, it is not either one. Now, off the top of my head, the RT version of Surface comes in 32 and 64 gigabyte variants, right? The storage allotment. But it's what is it? What's this? I spent the entire day in Paris, so I was completely unprepared for this particular story. But it is a 11.6-inch screen, basically. I think.
Yeah. What is it? 10. It's the standard 11 point. What is it? 11.2 or 10 point?
iPad sized, but wide. Okay. All right. So iPads start at like $500. Okay. You could get last year's model for $400. There's no way that the Surface costs $200. I mean,
no.
Even if Microsoft's point was we're going to take a loss on this thing to push it into the market, that's like $350. It's not $199. That's crazy.
But here's how I kind of justified in my head for a second. I was like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. They're going to take a loss on the device, like they've done in the past with the Xbox, and they're going to make it up with apps.
Make it up in volume.
Yeah, so they're going to have a ton of these out there, and people are going to be downloading the apps, and they're going to, of course, take a cut from it, and that's how they make the money. But
it's not going to happen.
Their app store is still not proven that it's going to be successful to any extent.
Listen.
There's no model really created where they could predict how much money they're going to make from that app store. So that's out the window.
It's baloney. It's baloney. I spent the past 2.5 years arguing that the iPad is too expensive at $500, right? That this thing, which is essentially a giant iPod Touch, is too expensive at $500, right? Microsoft needs to meet or I mean, like absolute best case, scenario, beat that price, but they're going to do that barely at best, right? There's no way it comes
Yeah.
in much under that. And I can say from having seen um, the product lineup for the Windows RT third-party tablets from all of Microsoft's partners, and the pricing of each of those, that 199 would not just undercut the pricing of every other tablet coming out from all of these other companies. It's less than half the cheapest of those. Somebody asked me today via email, Paul, you've complained that the iPad is too expensive. I mean, if Windows RT starts at $500 and goes up from there, does that mean that Windows RT is also too expensive? And the point there is like, well, that's an interesting question, because Windows RT is a more sophisticated system than the iPad, both from a hardware and from a software perspective. But the iPad's been around for 2.5 years, and it's building on a software ecosystem, not just software, but an entire ecosystem that's been around since 2007 with the iPhone.
But here's the other thing. A lot of people could go and say that the iPad is a little too expensive, but what was that in comparison to? We were comparing that to the netbooks and laptops. But now that we have...
Too expensive for what it was.
For what it was.
Expensive for what it was.
But how about now when we have things like the Kindle Fire on the market and the 7-inch, $199 tablets on the market, is it still too expensive?
Absolutely, because when we were just kind of chatting about this a little bit before the show started. The Nexus 7, which is a 7-inch tablet, the version I have, I think, has 16 gigs. It's the higher end version. Is a great little tablet. Great little tablet. You look at this thing and you think, well, you know what? If this thing was the size of an iPad, I mean, how much could it cost? $300, $350, not $500, not $600, not $700, not $830. The iPad is a luxury item. There's no doubt about it. But Windows RT is like a computer. It's a PC, so you kind of have to give it a little bit of leeway there. But on the other hand, you also have to say, look, these things are going to compete against each other. And the iPad has a 2.5-year head start. It has apps.
Yeah. It has a lot of apps, and they're good apps.
Yeah. People aren't buying the device. They're buying into the ecosystem.
Yeah.
And when that device stops working or, becomes obsolete 2 years down the road or whatever, they're going to buy another one, and all those apps are going to move forward.
But do you think
Windows RT does not have that?
But do you think the entire concept of there being a $199 Surface is based on the fact that there's an ecosystem created for apps, and you could subsidize the cost of the device with the apps?
No.
Because if that was the case, then Apple should have done it, years ago.
No, come on. No, there's no way. There's an argument to be made that someone should make a $200 Windows RT tablet that is purely a consumption device that will be the sort of Microsoft-oriented version of the Nexus 7 or the Kindle Fire or whatever, the Barnes & Noble Nook. Absolutely. But the Surface is not it. And there is, by the way, just so we're clear, there is no device coming out in October that's like that. There just isn't.
Oh, so the claim was that there was a big, I'll tell you, oh God, I can't believe I just closed this out. Now I remember what I was looking for. Because I looked at the story earlier, and I said, I got to bring this up with Paul, because he would definitely have heard this if it was true. It claims that, according to an inside source, a session was held at Microsoft's recent Tech Ready 15 conference, in which all the launch details were laid out. If things go according to plan, the Microsoft Surface for Windows RT tablet will launch in October, which is no surprise, and will be at a $199 price.
There's no way.
So this apparently happened at Tech Ready 15, and everything was laid out on the table. And it's it's one source, apparently.
The Toshiba Windows RT tablets are now not happening. Okay,
then but it's done.
I guess they're looking at next year now. They just can't get the components. It's not going to make sense for them. But if you were to look at the entire base of all of the companies that are making Windows RT tablets that intend to have stuff available for launch in October, which is not a big list of companies, by the way, but whatever. It's some list of companies. Those products are all going to fall, all of them, every single one of them, within the price range that the iPad sells for right now. All of them. Okay? There are none lower. There are none higher. That's as clear as I can put it without just spelling it out, because I really can't do that. But I'm looking at it right now as we talk. There is nothing outside of that range.
Yeah.
So, without spelling it out any more explicitly, the notion that a Microsoft tablet, a tablet made by the company that is partnering with these other companies, some of which are long-lived partners, PC makers, would somehow undercut them.
I mean, you're talking about Acer,
whoever
Toshiba,
they may be,
yeah,
whoever they may be, would somehow undercut their partner products by costing less than half. I mean, come on, seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, that puts the notion that Surface puts Microsoft in a bad place with its partners in a completely different category. Before you could make the argument, well, it's a design thing. They just wanted to get it out there. Maybe the other guys will come into lockstep and everything will be fine. But once you price it like that, I mean, they're specifically screwing over their partners. I mean, there's no way you can justify that. This device is not a 7-inch tablet designed for playing games and watching movies. It's a computer. It's not. It's not $199. It's not $199. It just isn't.
I can't. I mean, I wish it was $199 because then, that's the way you saturate the market. I mean, you're right. I would buy one for everybody in my family for Christmas.
Exactly.
I mean, and if you're comparing what's at the $199 price range currently.
What kind of an iPod Touch could you buy for $199? Right? Isn't $199 the very cheapest, lowest end 8 gigabytes of storage iPod Touch?
Yeah,
that's
it
what $199 is.
It is.
This is not a computer.
And it's also it's a 10-inch device. I mean, it's a large device. You're not talking about this. This is a $199 device. I mean, the market has kind of created itself that this is the $199 entry level tablet. This is the $199 entry level tablet.
Yes, there's a $199. You could buy tablets for under $199, but you have to go to like CVS or something. One of those weird,
you're gonna get like a Pantech ebook / tablet.
Is Bandai still around? If they were, they would make one.
They would make one, yeah.
Yeah.
GE tablets, you're gonna see some of those.
Sylvania,
yeah. I really want to take a baseball bat to all those Sylvania netbooks that are running Windows XP, and they're like 700 megahertz. You see it in CVS.
Nice.
It's like $99, and people are going crazy during Black Friday for them.
You thought an atom was slow, but we found a way to make it slower. Yeah.
All right. So pretty much, it's not going to be $199. I mean, it's just silly.
We don't live in bizarre world. There's
yeah.
No way.
Listen, I've been wrong on the iPad. I predicted that the iPad would be useless, and here we are a couple of years later. And
I predicted the iPad would start at $999.
Did you really? Is that what you had said?
because it's Apple, and they don't price things like that way. So the way I explained the iPad price when they first announced it was this is low for Apple. I mean, it's not low for anyone else. I mean, Apple, through a combination of sucking up all the parts in the industry and just sort of establishing the price, ended up establishing a baseline for what amounts to a 10-inch tablet. And it's amazing to me that 2 years into this game, we still don't see anyone really selling a tablet that sells for significantly less for that at that price range. I think we will.
You think it's the cost of the actual device? I mean, the screen cost, just assembling it and actually it functioning. Because you have to remember the technology the amount of technology that's needed to run properly for these devices. It's a lot. I mean, you're thinking about it's doing exactly what you're doing with a large tower, and it has no fans.
Oh yeah. And that leads into your notes here about the ARM stuff and why this is so incredible. That ARM-based platforms are not compatible with the Intel stuff. So it's a little weird. We have these PCs coming out that are based on ARM, and they don't run all the old software we used to run, but they do run all the new software about to run. And they have incredible battery life, excellent form factors with like really thin, light designs and so forth. No fans.
So pretty much it's not generating a lot of heat.
They can run on what they call connected standby, which is basically with your phone or a tablet where you kind of you don't like actually power it down. You just stop using it. It kind of goes off, and it's not really off, but Microsoft calls this connected standby. It can exist in this mode without running out of battery power for 300, 400, or 500 days. I mean, it's kind of incredible. So it's a computer, yes, but it's also this kind of hybrid, I don't know, like media tablet, smartphone type device. It's a very interesting change to the whole PC paradigm.
Oh, it
So
is.
we'll see.
Yeah, and I want to get to that at the end because it's an interesting concept on where we're headed with
Oh,
the
right.
CPU.
I'm sorry. Yes.
No, it's
Sorry.
fine. It's okay. You ruined the part. It's a surprise. It's all right.
Here's how the movie ends.
To kind of stick on the Microsoft stuff, Mary Jo Foley had an interesting article in ZDNet. And it's going based on what we had discussed a couple weeks ago with how operating systems, the evolution of the operating system is kind of changing, and the fact that we might be seeing these once-a-year updates, much like how Apple's been doing it in the Microsoft side. And Mary Jo wrote an article saying, it may not be Windows 9, but we could potentially see a yearly update for Microsoft.
Right. By the way, this is something I've discussed with her, and this is something I've heard independently as well. And it's interesting because this is one of the rare occasions where I looked at this thing and I said, it can't go the way it's been going. They have to change it because the problem with this Metro stuff, as I'll still call it, the new Windows 8 stuff, is that it's new. It's a 1.0 platform. The rest of Windows has kind of evolved over the years, over the decades, really, and is a very established and mature set of technologies. But the Metro stuff, the new Windows 8 stuff, is brand new, and it can't sit there for 3 years like they've done in the past.
It's going to need some tweaks.
Yeah, so I'd have to think back now when this happened exactly, but I want to say back in July, Steven Sinofsky sent out a memo to everyone in the Windows team and said, we're not doing the 3-year thing anymore. We're going to be updating on a quicker schedule. And he didn't specify a year, at least not in the part that I was able to see, but there's more to this memo than I've seen, that Mary Jo's seen, and others have seen, which is part of the problem. A little bit of speculation has to creep into here, but the 3-year cycle that Windows has been on for a long time made sense for that kind of a desktop product. It doesn't make sense in the fast-moving world of, I guess we call it consumer electronics. And so you think about Windows Phone. Windows Phone gets updated every single year in lockstep. iOS gets updated roughly once a year, probably even quicker, really, but let's say once a year. The iPad, obviously, there's a new iPad every year, new iPods every year. That's the way these things occur.
But let's go to the Microsoft side. You look at the Xbox, and they're doing UI tweaks almost every year at this point.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Yeah, dashboard updates at least once a year. So you have to do that because consumers expect these things to remain fresh. They buy into this ecosystem. They want new stuff, and it's a trick with Microsoft because, of course, they have over 50% of their customer base is these enterprise or business customers who don't want new stuff, but then they have consumers that are an increasingly big part of their audience as well, and increasingly important. So they do want new stuff. And how do you bridge the gap between these two markets or audience bases, and how do you update Windows in a way that's not disruptive? You can't just come out with Windows 9 next year, right? It can't be Windows 9. It has to be something like Microsoft used these terms in the past, which I don't think they'll use in the future, like service packs or feature packs. And
listen, Apple's done it for the last 11 years.
Yeah, I think actually Apple is the model, and so when you look at Microsoft has done this with their online services, and so they have things like Windows Azure or Office 365 or Windows Intune or whatever it is, where they're updating the capabilities of the service over time. You never hear anything. I do this because I have to differentiate between them when I write about them, but I'll refer to something like Windows Intune 1, Windows Intune 2, Windows Intune 3. But the truth is, when you subscribe to that or any other Microsoft service, you're just getting the service. You get the updates for free.
Yeah.
So you don't think of versions. There's no such thing as Office 365 2.0 or Office 365 2013. It's just at some point there are minor updates. You get them automatically. At some points there are major updates. You will get them eventually automatically. You can opt into them, because they're big updates.
Do you think that this is going to be the SP updates? I don't think they're going to.
I don't think they're going to do it that way. I think for Windows 8 they're going to do it like they've done it for their online services. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me to discover that there is no such thing as Windows 9, and that basically it just is Windows.
Just Windows, and probably maybe like a code number, 8.5, 9,
well,
9.1.
People who care about this stuff will always know. This is how it's going to happen. I mean this like from a a futurist standpoint. Not I have all the inside information.
Are you sure about that, Paul?
Yeah, no,
okay.
I am. I literally know nothing about how they're actually going to do it. But but you can see it happening. So in Office 2013, they're introducing this notion of a subscription model. And people sort of immediately react to that in a very negative way until you find out that for hopefully what is a very low cost per month, you can install this thing on 5 computers, not just one, right? And that I think that's how they're going to get you, where it becomes like a no-brainer to do it this way, but they get you on what Microsoft really wants, which is consumers to pay every single month just like their enterprise customers do. And once they have you on that schedule, once they make you an offer that you can't refuse, you don't have to worry about version numbers anymore. If you subscribe to Windows on your PC or your Windows RT device, whatever it is, you just get the updates for free. It's like automatic. You're going to wake up one day and you're going to have a little screen that says, hey, congratulations, we just installed all this stuff and everything's better. And then if you install from scratch, you just get the newest one right then,
So, but how would they do that for, if you buy a new PC and it comes with Windows 8, how would they do that? You get it automatically for free? I'm just curious on how they would have to present
Obviously,
that for.
So they still need to have these milestone versions, right? I mean, there will be something that maybe they do bill as Windows 9, which is contrary to exactly what I just said 10 seconds ago. But they'll have some milestone versions that every X number of years they bundle this stuff together, and that's what goes on the PC now. Ideally, that isn't what happens, and that you get whatever the then current version of Windows is when you buy a new PC, and then you can opt in or not at that point. We're in a weird spot with Windows 8 because the stuff that's new in Windows 8 is so new, it's not ready, right? It's not complete. If you follow the development of software, from you can think about things like .NET when it first came out, or the Zune PC software is a great example, or iOS, or Mac OS 10. Remember the first version of Mac OS 10, this is going back 12 years, 10 years, whatever, couldn't play DVD movies.
Yeah, right? You're right. I mean, it's an evolution, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. This is a major step, but
the point being that's what happens when you start it from scratch. You have to get all the basics right, but there's some really obvious stuff you have to do that isn't going to be there in 1.0. So you have to think, well, how are we going to update those people?
It's not fair to charge them, another $100 or whatever it is in 3 years, and they have to wait 3 years to fix it.
We're giving them something that's essentially incomplete. Microsoft cannot promote it that way, but that's what it is. There's no doubt about it. It's especially true of Windows RT because Windows RT can't run all the old desktop apps. At least in the case of Windows 8, you can say, well, Photoshop still runs. What am I worried about?
But this also allows them. This also allows Microsoft to kind of answer the people that are not going to be really happy with certain features in Windows 8. You're going to see a lot of that with this version because it's a totally different operating system than what we're used to. And a lot of people, there's going to be little things here and there that they hate, and Microsoft will be able to do these, fixes to the UI and the functionality of the operating system without people having to wait 3 years. And my personal opinion was, I don't think Apple got their act together with OS 10 until Leopard.
Tiger,
I hated Tiger. I still can't go on a Tiger machine. Leopard was the first one that I really liked. Before that, I mean, I've always used a Mac on and off. I mean, I was never a big fan of it until Leopard. I'm like, wow, they finally got it. But it took them how many years? 7 years?
I don't have the same relationship with the Apple stuff, so I can't really say on that score. There's nothing like it on the Windows side to compare it to. So this is kind of new territory. I think the thing I would say about about Windows 8 and the Metro stuff, as I will still remain calling it, is from sort of a base OS standpoint, there are some big picture things that need to get fixed. I mean, like multitasking kind of stuff that I think are important to people. This notion of I want to run Metro apps and desktop apps, and I want to do them in some way that makes sense side by side. Maybe is there going to, something around those lines? Even if it has to be multi-screen, is there some way this can be more elegant? I mean, I think those things will be addressed. But the very basics of Windows 8, honestly, are pretty strong. And without updating the OS itself, other than the low-level capabilities, which I think is really what this Mary Jo Foley, blue stuff is about. A lot of it's going to be handled just by the normal mechanism where apps get updated all the time, and that a lot of what people will think of is Windows 8 is just these apps, like the Mail app, the Calendar app, the Messaging app, the Xbox Games app, the music and video apps, all that stuff. Those things can all be updated whenever. We might wake up next Thursday and several of them have been updated. And then 12 days later, several more of them will be updated. And 2 months down the road, they'll be updated again. Like that stuff will happen. A year from now, the Windows 8 that we're running, even if the OS is never updated, just by virtue of all those apps being updated, it will be a completely different experience than it is today. And so I think it's actually gonna coalesce pretty quickly, I bet.
So now October 26th is the release date. We're gonna pretty much find out what the masses think right after that.
I know.
The day of, we're gonna start seeing either, oh my god, I love it, or people absolutely hate it. Where do you think it's gonna lie? I mean, Paul, you've used it for a while, so you're kind of used to it by now. But that first impression that the tech bloggers are gonna write about, those first reviews, what do you think it's gonna be?
Okay, I'm really nervous about those guys because they screwed Vista, right? Vista was not as bad as everyone thought. Those guys ruined Vista. I hope they don't influence people in that way. Honestly, I think the best way to approach Windows 8 is by a sense of ambivalence. That the desktop itself, the stuff that you use today that you know and love, is better in Windows 8. It looks better. It is better. It has more capabilities. That's fantastic. And there's this other stuff on the side. It's kind of over there on the side. It's like these media apps. There are new full screen experiences. You may not want to use them on your desktop computer.
Yeah.
You may not. If you have a laptop, which most of us do now, maybe you're on a plane or something, you want to watch a movie, listen to music, whatever, those apps actually start to make a lot of sense. If you have a tablet, we get into no-brainer territory. And so I think it's going to be, I think the right reaction to Windows 8 isn't that this thing is awesome or this thing sucks. It's like, yeah, okay, there's some good stuff here. And then it's going to be an evolution, I think, with people as they update to new machines. I think this is, everyone always talks about every version of Windows is best in a new computer, but I think this is maybe going back to Windows 95, the best example of that, where you really want not just a new computer, but like a touch computer.
I want to see a bunch of guys with pocket protectors running through the stores to buy Windows 95. I want that. I want that shot. You know which one I'm talking about? That the news always plays. Yeah. I mean, even when Windows 7 came out, and the news was commenting, like the local news, they go, Microsoft's latest operating system, Windows 7 is released, and they go to this shot of Windows 95. And
it's a guy holding the box over his head.
The whole guy's like this. Yeah.
Sure.
I want that again.
We'll see. Sure. I mean, anyone who, if you, for some reason, care about the Microsoft stuff, and you've been watching as every minor Apple release gathers a line around the corner for some reason, there's a little bit of angst here because you want it to be like that, and I'm not positive it's going to be like that. I don't think it's a Vista style disaster. I don't think it's like Windows Me or Windows Vista or something.
Yeah,
it's not. It's not like that. I mean, it's a different world. I mean, I think the success of this thing or the relative failure of it was going to be based on, frankly, on how the RT stuff does. I mean, I think that's the big deal. This is
you think the entire success of this operating system is going to be banked on RT? And not the desktop?
Because I think, so in other words, 3 years down the road, right? If Windows 8 sells like Windows 7 did, that's kind of a disaster. Because that means it's sold on PCs. Because without doing anything, Microsoft can sell an operating system for PCs that they're going to sell Windows licenses every month, roughly 20 million of them. And that's what they do. So 300 million computers go out the door, 350 million computers, 90% of them run Windows. They do that automatically, right? What they need to do is capture part of the market that's not those traditional computers. It needs to be the tablets and the different kind of hybrid devices and all this stuff, the things that run Windows RT. I think that's going to be the differentiator if Windows RT can take off. If Windows RT is stillborn, that's kind of a major condemnation of this whole strategy. I mean, because the point of this was we need to do something to counter the iPad before the iPad really takes off. And the iPad's been doing very well. But what if it does even better?
Now, I'm taking this question blindly from the chat room. A viewer wanted to know, you had recently said that you had some hands-on experience with an RT tablet?
No, I didn't.
You didn't? Okay.
No, what I have is a list of all of the RT devices that are coming out.
Oh, a list. Okay.
Yep.
Anything?
I have not used it.
And of course, you shouldn't comment on anything you can, but are you happy with it?
Well, happy is an interesting word. I'm not usually very happy about things like this. I guess I'd go back to my previous conversation with the iPad. I've talked about how that thing is a little too expensive. Um, Windows RT is a more capable device, but the iPad platform is more mature. So I think to make sense, Windows RT has to come in under the iPad, and they're not, and that's not good enough.
You have to compete head to head.
They need to, well, I mean, from a price standpoint only, they need to cost less. I think that's just realistic.
They said, sorry, I misunderstood Paul's post. Okay, so at least now we all know. Okay. Now we all know. I want to remind everybody, if you miss any portion of the show or you checked in late, you could always subscribe to us. We're on iTunes, we're on Zune, we're pretty much everywhere you could imagine. Or you could go to our website, gfknetwork.com. We're also on Paul's website, winsupersite.com. Look at this. We're very professional here. It's 4:30, and we're doing little show plugs here and there. So we're trying to get on schedule here. I do have a concept here, Paul. And, we played a 10-year game. One idea is that I want to do what-ifs. And we had discussed this early on, and we never actually did the what-ifs. I couldn't. There's a lot, I guess, I had, but I never really use it. But this week, I built a Hackintosh.
Yeah, so explain that.
So
explain what.
A Hackintosh is, I took my i7, I build all my PCs. I have an i7 here, and I'm a little hot here on the mic. I have an i7, it's a top-of-the-line machine, and I was just bored yesterday, and I said, you know what, let me install OS X on here, OS 10.
Okay.
And
how did you manage it?
I'll tell you, it was the most simple thing I've ever done.
Huh.
It was so easy to do, and I don't even have, there's like a suggested list of hardware that you need. I'm not even on the list.
Okay.
Some of my hardware is not on there. You have to partition the drive the proper way, and that was a little tricky, but if you follow the instructions, it's pretty simple. But the reason why we did it, in reality, I was bored, but the video encoding machine that we use, the video encoding software that we use to stream out, runs much better on the Mac than it does on Windows. It was natively.
You don't feel like spending $10,000 on a Mac Pro workstation?
No, Paul. No, not right. This week. So rather than, getting a Mac Pro, which is useless, I decided to build one. And I'm looking at it right now. First of all, the most bizarre thing is seeing it on my Windows machine. Right. Seeing like the Apple logo and everything. I mean, it's a very uncomfortable thing.
I'm uncomfortable just thinking about it.
Just think about it, because it's a big HP logo on the bottom of the screen of the monitor. Sure. And here it's running, Mountain Lion. It was the entire process was so simple. I mean, really, really, really easy. And it's running really well. The only thing that I've noticed is that the CPU the Mac handles the CPUs, I guess, the way that the cores function really differently than the way Windows does it. And I'm going to argue the point that it actually, the CPUs are the cores are working a lot better on the Windows machine than they do on the Mac.
I was going to use the word inefficiently. Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm still tweaking it. I'm still learning how to do it because it's a fun little project. But I have to tell you, it was really, really easy to do. So now this led into the what if.
Okay.
And this is a big what if. And the odds of this ever happening are slim to none. But let's say Windows 8 is a disaster.
The worst possible.
The worst. I mean, and I'm not talking about it as an operating system. It is that just people just hate it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And
by the way, the problem is what you're suggesting is not implausible, right? When I hear that, I don't immediately react like that's never going to happen. I actually think that could happen. I think that's the danger of what they're doing.
That people hate it.
Absolutely. Whether they deserve to or not. In other words, that people who should know better will influence others in the wrong way, and it snowballs. You can picture this happening.
Yeah.
It's not inconceivable.
It's not. And I personally, I have it here on the computer. I've used it. I have a difficult time using it a lot more than I should because it's on older hardware, and I don't have the old gesturing. I don't have a lot of that.
I'll just throw it. This has nothing to do with your what if, but like you've taken, you've taken away the best part of the Mac experience. I think the hardware, and taken the worst part, put it on the PC, like the software. To me, like that's the worst possible combination. Like I at least understand when people buy a Mac, they're beautiful machines. Like I get it.
Oh, they're beautiful, but I personally I like the operating system, Paul. I don't find anything wrong with it. I like it.
I don't like it. Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily 1,000 times better than Windows. I don't even think it's better than Windows. I think right now they're equal, in my opinion. I consider Windows 7 and the latest version of the Mac operating system equal.
Okay. All right. So anyway, back to the what if.
The what if is there's two what ifs here, and we've spoken about it almost as a joke, but the enthusiasts make up a small portion of the people that are going to be complaining. But what if they decide this is going to be a thing and they're going to start going over to the Mac, or they go over to Linux? Can that possibly happen? And how will that impact Windows?
Going to Linux is never going to happen. So that's we just skip that part of it. I actually think remember when Apple introduced the Mac Mini and they said you can bring over everything from your Windows install, right? You can take your monitor, your keyboard, your mouse. All you need is our computer. We'll give you the little basic part of it. You plug in everything you own, and you go off to the races.
Yeah.
What if they didn't even require that? What if they did sell this thing as software? What if they said, you know what? We get that you hate Windows 8, and we're going to help you. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to give you Mac OS X Lion, or whatever it's called now, Mountain Lion, for $20, and it's going to install in any Intel computer. I honestly, I don't believe that Windows 8 could crater hard enough for that to be 50% of the market. But seriously, like, they could make major inroads with something like that. That's actually a very dangerous thing for Microsoft, because that would be Apple controlling the tablet market, having a significant portion of the smartphone market.
See, in a post-Steve Jobs world, in a post-Steve Jobs Apple, I could see that happening.
Right.
It's a realistic. Right. It's a realistic. Who knows if it could possibly happen? But it's almost like this realistic idea that now is their time. It is plausible, and they could take advantage of this entire situation where people are.
Right. Yeah. So when Windows Vista came out, Apple kind of, the way they seized the initiative at the time was they came out with those "I'm a Mac, I'm a PC" ads, right? And some of they were all kind of snarky and terrible, and a lot of them, frankly, had like these weird outright lies about Windows, but it fed off of this belief that's just kind of hanging out there, that Windows users suffer from awful viruses, that it's unreliable, that the blue screens all the time, all this baloney that is like obviously this stuff happens, it happens to the Mac side too, whatever, but they did a good job of latching on to the kind of pet peeves or common knowledge we had about Windows or whatever. Imagine if but that was just like marketing. Like, imagine if they just went for the jugular, and they're like, you know what? You can have the software too.
Here it is. You can install this. $29.95.
Yeah.
You can put it on every Windows machine.
Because remember the equation for Windows 8 is PCs plus devices, right? And frankly, you got to put smartphones into this category as well. And at that point, even if Apple did nothing more than, say, double their market share, right, which is pretty low right now, under 10% in the United States and 5% worldwide, that's pretty significant. And then you add it with all the iPads, where they dominate in the tablet market, and the smartphone market, where they're number 2. All of a sudden, when you look at what Apple says they are, which is a mobile, I think they said a mobile computing company or a mobile devices company or whatever, this makes plenty of sense. Especially if they designed this thing to say, look, you made a mistake. You bought an Ultrabook. Okay, it's not a MacBook Air. But, hey, whatever. We will support these common Intel chipsets.
So how would they do? See, this is where it gets tricky. How would they do, backwards compatibility with older hardware? It would need to be a very strict guideline.
Well, look, one thing Apple's done very well is manage these transitions from hardware platform to hardware platform, right? So obviously no one's running PowerPC software anymore in Macs. Or if they are, they're not doing it on Intel compatible Macs or whatever. So this is not an issue. It's just the Mac software base is where it's at. Steam is on there, games are on there, Microsoft Office is on there. There's a pretty compelling case, and I don't think they're going to do it, but That's a good what if, because
But boy, if there was a time,
this would be it. This would everyone, I think on the Mac side, a lot of people kind of cheered the I'm a Mac, I'm a PC stuff for some reason. But honestly, at the end of that campaign, they hadn't really made a huge headway. Their iOS devices have been extremely successful in ways that the Mac never was. And I don't think this what if would make the Mac as successful as iOS, but the Mac business is an excellent business as is. I mean, how much more incredible would it be? Plus, this kind of humiliation for Microsoft feeds on itself, right? If Windows 8 causes this, and Apple seizes the initiative like this, it's the snowball effect, right? This is when people are like, well, screw it. I mean, I was holding out for this Windows RT thing or whatever, these devices. This is not happening. I'm not gonna think about it anymore. Now I am gonna buy an iPad. Now I am gonna buy into and they buy into the ecosystem, and that's really where Apple wins. It's not whether the Mac has 10 or 20% of the market or 25% or whatever. It's customers who are buying. They're buying the Apple smartphone. They're buying the Apple tablet. Yeah, maybe they buy the Apple computer too, but they're in the ecosystem. Now you're in that.
Where do you see it going if that was the case? If let's say it gets released, do you see a large group of people jump ship? How do you see that happening?
It's hard to,
in this imaginary world that Apple releases it to everybody.
I don't know. I mean, I always think about this from sort of the Microsoft perspective. I always feel like Microsoft has this kind of fallback that can occur for them where, people kind of forget this, but Microsoft was at first a provider of developer tools and application software, and then eventually operating systems. The thing we kind of know them for is even today not their biggest business, operating systems. Windows. There's no reason to think that Microsoft couldn't be a very successful company in the future, providing platforms that ran on Android and on iOS and on the Mac and whatever. I mean, and that's kind of a weird apocalyptic future. Yeah. I mean, I don't mean to get weird about this. I mean, I don't mean like I sit at night thinking about this, but I think that Microsoft, they make good stuff. And by the way, for whatever it's worth, some of the best stuff that they're doing today is on the online services front, with Office 365 or Outlook.com or SkyDrive or whatever. One of the things that happened today, one of the news items today was that SkyDrive has finally come out on Android. Surprise, surprise. That service just keeps getting better and better and better. I mean, Microsoft could become a provider of services and solutions for other platforms too. They don't have to be the platform maker.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
No, what got me thinking is, I did it on this, and I was holding on. I didn't want to do it for a while because, early on when a couple of years ago when people started doing this, it was just a horror story. I knew a couple of people that did it, and I thought this might be a good reason to do it. I had a free day. I didn't have much going on, and I installed it, and it was so easy. It was maybe a little bit more complicated than doing a standard, clean install.
No, this is when I think about like the technology stuff. I mean, what you're describing is something I've probably spent 50% of my time doing, which is just putting stuff on stuff. Like in the early days, I would install all these bizarre Linux
distros,
distributions. As we call it. I used to do like the Slackware, floppy-based distributions at one
Windows.
point. Absolutely. Oh yeah, I went through various versions of that stuff. I've tried them all.
But I think, here's the thing. We like to make fun of Linux, but I think they've come such a long way in the last 5 years.
I have no way of knowing if that's true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm sure you're true. I'm sure you're right. Rather,
but there was a time. There was a time, in the early 2000s that there was this fantasy that they would be the third operating system. They'd be a major competitor. And it just fell apart.
But it wasn't a fantasy. I mean, Microsoft thought this was going to happen too.
Yeah.
I coincidentally, I was in Israel in 2000, and I was working with a software developer out there. And randomly, the guy who ran the company came into my office and said, he said, come here for a second. You got to talk to this guy. And they were interviewing a developer who was working for another company based in Israel, and Microsoft had contracted with them to port Office to Linux.
Oh boy!
Just in case.
Just in case it exploded.
And so I actually talked to this guy. He was Russian. I talked to him through a Russian interpreter. It was the most random thing on earth. He had no idea I was there. It was not like a weird setup. I mean, the guy was just interviewing him for a job and said, I heard this and said, you got to talk to this guy. And I wrote about it. It was one of the very first things I ever wrote for Windows IT Pro, which back in this day was probably still Windows NT Magazine or whatever. But it never happened, right? I mean, obviously Linux kind of created in this sense. It never really took off in the desktop space. But Microsoft has always looked out at their potential competitors and their real competitors and planned accordingly. I don't think that there's a kind of a DEF CON 2 program at Microsoft now where when Windows 8 and the Metro stuff creators that they're going to do something else. I don't think they're going to go back to the desktop. I mean,
it's all or nothing at this point, right? I mean, they really can't revert back.
No, I don't see that ever happening,
And even if they did, it would be such a hit to the company.
Sure.
The morale and the confidence behind what they're putting, I mean, it would take a significant hit.
It's Windows, right? So I always sort of thought with Windows Phone, people said, why do you back Windows Phone? Like Zune failed magnificently. Why would you back Windows Phone? And I was like, well, the phone is central to their strategy. Like they're going to stick with this one, But you talk about Windows compared to Windows Phone, even that's another order of magnitude different, right? I mean, this is Windows. This is what people think of when they think of Microsoft. It's really their number 2 business, but obviously,
I mean, 90-something% of the entire world uses this.
Yeah.
That computing wise. But right. It also one major thing that people, we talk about how good the operating system is, and we talk about iOS and that it's a good operating system, and we talk about Android. But one thing that none of these companies have that Apple has, it's not the ability to create great software. Because if you really compare all of them, let's say in the phone side, right? Let's compare Android, Windows Phone, and iOS.
Yep.
If you put all these side by side, you know what? They do the same thing.
They really do.
And there's certain aspects to all of them that sometimes some are better than others at certain things. But in the overall evaluation of it, they're all good.
They'll all get you there.
They'll all get you there, and they'll do a good job, and they're almost all equal. But one thing
this is why the ecosystem thing's so important.
Yeah. But one thing that Apple does better, it's not even the ecosystem, it's marketing. Apple has created this bizarre cult following behind it, and they've convinced everybody from the Apple guy to the soccer mom that this is what they need to get. And if they don't have the latest one, they're missing something. And if you get an Android phone, you're missing something big time. If you get a Windows phone, you're missing it even more. They've created this weird want factor behind this device every year. And in Microsoft and Android, in my opinion, will never be able to get to that level. It's with PR.
It's amazing because in the Microsoft world, the way that they've done that in the past was through software. They would say, you need to get the new software. Every 3 years, we'll update you with service packs and stuff, but every 3 years or so, we're going to come up with this new version of Windows, and it's going to make the other one look stupid. And you have to get that. You have to buy it. Most people would do that by buying a new computer, but for Microsoft, the company that made the software, they only got like a small part of that. They got the software bit. Windows 7 was a big deal because people actually bought the software for the first time.
Yeah.
It was kind of
and they were happy, and they loved it.
And they liked it. Yeah, and it worked out great. Windows 8 does an even better job at that kind of stuff, by the way, but whatever. The Apple thing is more phenomenal because they did it with software like Microsoft because, their roots were in, making these PCs. But they convinced people to buy like hardware all the time.
All the time, every year.
And so, and you can talk about any of these devices. It's amazing. There will be people who replace their iPod every year. Amazing. There will be people who replace their iPhone every year. That's crazy. That's very expensive.
iPads every year.
iPad every year. How about a Mac every year? I know people who replace their Macs every single year.
I mean, I'm on a 3-year cycle at this point. Listen, I've only had a Mac twice. I had a white MacBook and I got a MacBook Pro, and the only reason why I really replaced it is because I destroyed the other one. Which I won't get into what I did. By the way, there's some shady Russian computer repair place right now with my MacBook, and they're not answering their phone. So That's an interesting situation I'm in. But
But I don't mean to say this is a significant part of the population. Well, it is, but it is a significant part. There are people who update this stuff really regularly. This is a good model. I mean, it seems unsustainable, but so the truth is, so far, it's been working out, and that's why you can see them do things like offer the next OS 10 upgrade for $20, or here's iOS for free now. We used to charge for it, but now we're just going to give it to you.
I mean, it's amazing, because if you go back to when they were dying, when Apple was, every news article, every web text, tech website at that point, and we're going back to the mid 90s, late 90s, was Apple it's almost over for them. It was like people were rooting that they fail. And in the 10 years, they changed their entire perception of the market. I mean, people don't see Apple as this dying company. And they were able to achieve it by great PR.
And by simplifying, too. I mean, one of the things that, when people look at companies like RIM or Nokia, which is a great example, actually, they see these companies shedding stuff now. And you see the death spiral. And people... This is the story, the beleaguered consumer electronics maker. Apple did the same thing. They simplified, right? They made hard decisions. They got rid of stuff. They had good leadership and so on. But yeah, marketing. It never would have happened without the marketing.
But interesting point in the chat room, and I want to bring this up. The DOJ was on Microsoft's back for a while, but now they become this driven company over the last decade. And they're extremely driven, and you look at what they did to the gaming world. They single-handedly changed the way gaming is done with the Xbox 360. Now we're going to the next version. I mean, my idea that it's an Excel spreadsheet and that's all you're going to use Windows for and Microsoft for has totally changed, and they become this innovative company. But why is it that with the youth using the consoles, why haven't they been able to bring that over to the operating system?
Yeah, the Xbox 360 is an enigma because it's this weird example of where Microsoft has seen a sort of an Apple level of success for that market and then acted accordingly, just like Apple does, right? And so you could make this argument that PC multiplayer gaming is free, right? No one charges for that. There's no charge to use Steam. There's no actual charge to use games from Windows Live either, for whatever that's worth. But on the Xbox, you pay for Xbox Live. And why is that? The why is that is because the people that love the Xbox really love the Xbox, and they're going to pay for everything. They're the goons like me who will happily cough up $60 a year to get on Xbox Live, and then we'll cough up another $60 to get on Call of Duty Elite or whatever.
I do it, and I don't really game. I do it because I want to be able to access Hulu and Netflix on it.
Right, because you don't have a choice.
I don't have a choice.
The thing that's weird about that is some of that stuff is on Apple TV, some of it's on Roku, some of it's on probably TiVo or whatever else. There are other places that got the stuff. Those places don't charge for that stuff.
Yeah,
but those places those businesses are smaller. And they just are trying to get a foot in the door. Microsoft, this is like their one big success. So you can see when Microsoft is like Apple, they behave like Apple, And I think we're going to see this if Office succeeds on a subscription basis, Windows is going to go to a subscription basis. There's no doubt about it. They have wanted for years to move consumers onto this thing that businesses have been on for years and have never really succeeded. They've tried this in the past many, many times. And it's the type of thing on the face of it, it sounds ludicrous, but you see how they're doing it with Office 2013 and it clicks and you're like, you know what? There will always be those people who say, no, I want to own stuff. And you can say, you know what? Congratulations. You can own Office 2013. Spend $500 and you get to install it on one computer.
Yours.
But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pay $6 a month and I'm going to install it on 5 computers and I'm just going to use it every month for the rest of my life.
And if you don't pay, you don't use it.
You know what? And I'm sorry, but I get it. I get the rationale against subscription services. I really do. But I'm sorry, it's a good business model.
Listen, you have an option, and that's what people want.
They're going to do both. Yeah,
you could either have it, or you could either buy it and install it, or you could pay the monthly and have it on all your machines.
Actually, you can see the start of this in Windows 8 too. You
Yeah.
know, when they're really locking down the licensing on Windows 8. So, Windows 7, you could install Windows 7 without a product key and then run it unlicensed. You can't even do that with Windows 8. You have to have a product key.
Yeah, I do that all the time, actually. I install it,
Of course.
and I run it for 30 days, and then
You're like, then maybe I'll extend the thing, and you can play around with it. You can't do that with Windows 8.
By the way, how are they going to, I had this question, and I'll ask you, I don't know, I think I probably did, but I forgot. How are they going to do how many machines can you install Windows 8 on? What's the number of machines you could upgrade?
Well, it's one.
Okay.
It's one. But here's the thing. It's $40.
Is it
right?
one like how Windows 7 is one?
No, it's literally one. So it's there's no such thing as a full version anymore, right? If you're going to build a computer yourself, your options were you could buy the full version of Windows, which is very expensive. You could buy an OEM version of Windows and hope the authorities weren't looking, because technically you weren't supposed to do that, but people do it all the time. You could buy the upgrade version of Windows and do one of the various hacks, to get that to work. You could subscribe to TechNet. You could subscribe to MSDN. There are all these ways to kind of do it more cheaply.
Yeah.
This version, I think their plan is basically this. We're going to price it reasonably, and we're not going to allow that other baloney to happen. And so they've been locking all the other stuff down. TechNet has been locked down considerably. Full version's gone. Activation's one. They're not screwing around. So I honestly, I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm kind of like a middle-aged white guy who lives in America or something, and I have an actual job. But I look at this and I think, this is fair. Yeah, whatever. I was never going to go into a store and buy Windows 7 Home Premium Full Edition for however much that cost, $179, $200.
I've done it. I mean, I've bought it a bunch of times.
Well, actually, I have too, but it's only because I do what I do for a living.
Yeah.
I mean, but in real life, I'm not. I don't buy software like that. Like I've bought things like Office, like Home and Student.
See, I think the model's broken. I don't think anybody buys software like that anymore.
Well, yeah, of course. So, in other words, now we're going to do this electronically, and now we're going to blow Office 2013 onto computers in like 10 minutes using this like awesome virtualized like electronic distribution thing, and they're going to say, we don't know what they're going to say, but let's just pretend they're going to say it's $5 or $6 or $10 a month, and you can install it on like 5 computers. And you know what? Like a lot of people are going to do that.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is, well, okay, you don't have to do that. You can buy it. Here's how much it's going to cost. And oh, by the way, one computer. And people are going to be like, yeah. Some people will do it because they can't stand not owning stuff. Like it means something to own electronic bits, but this is the same thing that happens in like subscription music services. I think you and I have talked about this notion that hopefully there will be subscription video services in the future, which I would love to be on, part of the, something I'd love to be part of. But at some point, you micromanage your MP3 collection, and after a while, you're like, just Spotify,
yeah,
or Zune Pass or whatever. And I think software needs to go it is. I don't think it is going this route. I think they will go that route with the operating system as well eventually.
To kind of go back to what we were saying before about ARM, I want to get to this. So I had a submission for the 10-year game, and somebody said, in 10 years, will ARM dominate the CPU? Will we see ARM-based machines? And I don't know what they were trying to exactly say, but this is how I interpret it. The fact that ARM, you're able to get performance out of them, they're fanless, they're low-powered, they're not running at a crazy high temperature. Will that be the future of the PC? Will we see desktops running these much smaller CPUs and requiring almost no fans? Will that be the future of the desktop in 10 years? I have to say no. And Paul, you give me your answer.
I think it's a little more nuanced than that. I would say it like this. Remember how there used to be desktop and then laptop versions of chips? Remember this? Right?
Yeah.
If you would go to the Intel catalog and there would be desktop chips and then there would be laptop chips. They don't really do that anymore, do they? Right? When you buy an Ultrabook or a desktop computer, you're basically getting the same chip. I realize there are higher end versions and so forth, but they don't really differentiate anymore. I think that the future of mainstream computing is going to be a combination of ARM plus what Microsoft calls system on a chip, which is the Intel and compatible answers to ARM, essentially, right? The caveat to that is that unless I'm misunderstanding something, the first generation of that stuff is like Atom based. So
Yeah.
I
mean,
don't
they
see the
still
entire
do it, by
PC.
the way. They still have mobile chips, just, mobile chip. But if you're going, most people are buying, i5s and i7s. They're not really buying
Well, what I mean is
the mobile version.
well, okay. So in other words, today you go into a Best Buy or you go into some online site and you buy a computer, like a desktop computer, and you're buying an i5, an i3, i5, i7 chip with integrated graphics or not, some hard drive, blah blah blah, whatever it is. Um, in the future, I mean, I think that we'll always have those high-end kind of systems, but those will be relegated more and more to the periphery, to the niche markets, and so forth. I think the future of this stuff is going to be more like computing devices of whatever shape, size, and form factor that all have this kind of integrated system on a chip design, essentially, where it's not just, it's not like CPU plus Intel integrated chipset. It's system on a chip, which is all of that stuff plus more.
Yeah.
It's really small. It's going to enable really small systems, really small portable systems, but it's going to be the basis of computing devices. And whether it's ARM or Intel, I don't think is going to matter to people too much. I mean, as long as the performance, the power management, the fanlessness of it, and so forth, the compatibility is all the same. I think that's going to be the big deal. And so I think Intel is too big and too smart of a company not to react to this. They've done very, very well in those times where they were not the innovator, like the x64 stuff. They adopted the platform, and then they kicked the crap out of the company that made that stuff. I mean, so Intel has had zero success with mobile devices. I mean, like zero.
I mean, they've really been.
Yeah.
I thought by now they would have had some sort of answer, but they really
Something.
don't. Yeah,
They don't.
Yeah.
But I think this system on a chip stuff, I think what you're going to see is, first gen will be Atom based, and people will or will not have some kind of negative reaction to that because it says Atom and they think of netbook and they think this thing's going to suck. But we'll see. We'll see whether it is terrible or I think it's going to be fine. But I think the second gen, you're going to see basically system on a chip versions of whatever, the i3, i5, i7, and then you'll have the desktop versions, which today would be like the equivalent of like a Xeon type thing, like a workstation kind of a niche market kind of a deal.
Yeah.
You're going to see system on a chip servers. I mean, why wouldn't you? They're so efficient, right? I mean, they're perfect for servers. I think that's this. ARM is. Here's the way to put it. I'm just making this up as I talk, obviously. But ARM is to the future of computing what AMD was to the future of computing back 5, 6, 7 years ago when they did the 64-bit version of x86.
Yeah, and they did great. They were kicking butt, and they were cheap. They were extremely fast compared to what Intel's doing, and then they just died.
And then Intel catch-ups. Yeah. So I'm not saying ARM's going to die. I have no idea. I mean, but I'm saying that eventually the things that make ARM special will become a central part of the mainstream computing chipsets from Intel. Like they have to. And I think that's what system on a chip is. I think system on a chip, from the Intel perspective, is Intel's reaction to ARM, just like what we now think of x64 was Intel saying, screw it. Okay, we have to, we had Itanium, we tried, it's not going to work. We're going to go x64. We know AMD did it. We're going to call it something else, but it's the same thing.
See, I see computing going fanless, totally fanless within the next couple of years. It has to. And, back to Apple, I think Apple's going to be the first one to do this, and they're going to make a big deal out of it. Look, everything is fanless. There's no fans in our computers. It's not generating heat. It's running cooler. Yep. I think they'll probably be one of the first ones to kind of do this
right.
with Intel.
What you just described is the next step. In other words, once you've made the MacBook Air, once you've made this really thin, solid state, everything, where do you go from there? Well, you remove the fan, right? And that's the ultimate Apple product because this is what Steve Jobs always wanted for Apple was no fans, right? The original Mac, the point was we don't want fans. And if you can do that in a form factor that is really incredibly thin and light and has that kind of instant-on performance, the thing I was talking about earlier, the connected standby stuff, you don't really think about this, right? You you may press a power button on your phone, but you know you're not turning it off, right? I mean,
Yeah.
do you ever think like what is the thing it's doing? In other words, I hit the power button, the screen goes off,
But it's
but I'm not
everything is
power.
on. Yeah.
But what is it? What is the thing? What is that called? I mean,
Like a
well,
standby.
it's right. It's like a
Yeah.
mode, right? So Microsoft calls that connect to standby, and I think the future of computing involves that kind of, we would almost call it performance. It's not like raw CPU performance, but it's the ability of a device to, when you open the lid on a laptop or whatever, come on immediately. Or when you walk up to your desktop computer and you hit a key on the keyboard, it's on, right? It's instant. I guess I would call it instant on performance. It's
Sure.
and even when it's sort of off, like your phone is sitting there, it's not really off, right? It's pinging your email services, it's pinging your social networking services, it's doing all this stuff in the background in a way that is friendly to the battery life and the power management of the device, but gives you that thing where when you look at the screen, it says, "Oh, by the way, someone commented on something that you did on Facebook, and you have two new emails, and you missed a phone call." That kind of stuff. And I think computers have to become as sophisticated as these small devices.
No, they have to be. And
Have to be.
and this whole idea behind fanless, I think the concept and the way where we're concentrating is Intel right now. Our ARM is able to do it currently. We're going to start seeing more and more ARM, based computers being out there and more people buying it. But
Right.
if we're going based on Intel, and which Intel will catch up eventually, this concept of a fanless computer is realistic for everyday use. I mean, the average person doesn't need the highest gaming machine possible. They'll probably get, the small, tiny little desktop, and they have it there, and they have a monitor. But even with heavy-duty gaming, I think the fans will always be there. The people that want the beefiness will still need to get the fans and have a traditional desktop. But for the everyday person, I 10 years, we're talking 10 years, I think the next 5 years, that's when the shift is going to start, where we're going to start seeing more and more of these no fans needed, whisper quiet, cool to the touch computers.
It's already starting. It's anyone who's used an iPad or an Android tablet or a smart. Has anyone owned a smartphone where I'm using it for games and it's hissing or something? I mean, smartphones don't do that, right?
Can you imagine if they did?
I know. I mean, that's.
I mean, look at the iPad, right?
Right. If the computer industry had come up with the smartphone or the tablet, that is what they would do. I mean, I have a Samsung i5 tablet that does that. You turn it on, it's like, it's not pleasant. And
I wouldn't imagine it to be.
No, unless it's really cold in the room and you're hoping to heat it. But you're looking to bring those things that are right about these mobile platforms to the PC, of course. It's weird because we think of these things as being less than PCs, right? They're not as powerful, but in many ways, they meet the actual needs of people and the expectations of people better than PCs do. I mean, PCs are kind of archaic, in some ways, and they need to catch up on that front. I think that's what Windows 8 is all about, by the way, from a software perspective. And I think it will enable, if Windows 8 is really successful, it will be these Windows RT devices, and these Windows RT devices are not going to have fans, I would imagine. Just like an iPad doesn't have a fan.
I mean, I'll give you an example, Paul. My studio right now is 92 degrees.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm sitting in 92 degrees right now, and that's because of the computers.
Right.
We have.
That's by the way. It's nice in January.
Oh, very nice in January. Not so nice in July.
August, it's not so great. Yeah.
No, not pleasant at all. I feel like I'm living in some sweltering jungle.
Well, I mean, remember when servers used to be these like big honking machines with like the processor would always be going full blast. I mean, power management type technologies have become incredibly sophisticated on the server side, but there's no reason that ARM or ARM-like designs aren't going to infiltrate the server world as well. I mean, you can see this happening everywhere, where it just becomes a more efficient utilization of hardware, electrical, power management, air conditioning, whatever resources. I mean, I think this is going to happen across the board. So, I don't expect my phone and tablets don't hiss, but even this Ultrabook that I'm using now for this thing, if I put this on, there are different power management modes. I can put this on high performance because I don't want it to shut down. Actually, it's on high performance now because we're doing the Skype thing, and I'm trying to eke out every bit of bandwidth I have here. It hisses. I mean, it's got a fan. It just does.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going to go away. I think you're right about that.
Interesting stuff, Paul. But it is time to wrap it up once again. It was a good show. I think you should stay in France because we've been doing good shows with you in France.
I would like to do that. I would.
It could be the drinking.
That's my long. Yes, exactly. It's the Calvados.
Yeah, I've been drinking scotch since halfway through the show. So I had tea in here once, and now it's scotch. I want to remind everybody, you can go to our website, gfknetwork.com. You could also check out Paul's site, winsupersite.com, for all things that have to do with Microsoft, and Paul Thurrott. Are you doing Windows Weekly this week?
Yes.
Okay, regular time?
Yes.
Okay.
Mary Jo's going to be gone this week. She's traveling. So, yeah, I'll do it from here.
A lot of fun, and it's a great show. One of my favorite podcasts on the net. Until next time, guys, we'll see you all, and I don't know, take care, brush your hair, and drink scotch out of a mug when you're doing a podcast, because it's fun. Good night, everybody.